Welcome to Sanguine Arts Locavart, the podcast that features interviews with local Twin Cities artists. This activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. I am your host, Mary Prescott, an interdisciplinary artist, composer, and pianist. Today we are speaking with Taja Will. Taja is a choreographer, performer, educator, and healing justice practitioner. Taja's approach integrates improvisation, somatic modalities, text, and vocals in contemporary performance. Their aesthetic is one of spontaneity, bold choice making, sonic and kinetic partnership, and the ability to move in relationship to risk and intimacy. Will's work explores visceral connections to current sociocultural realities through ritual, archetypes, and everyday magic. Taja is a recipient of the Jerome Hill Artist Fellowship and a McKnight Choreography Fellowship, has received recent support from the National Association of Latinx Arts and Culture, the Minnesota State Arts Board, and Metropolitan Regional Arts Council. Welcome, Taja. Thank you for speaking with us today. Taja, in addition to your work as a performing artist, you are also involved with consulting, coaching, and being a working artist with a disability. Can you share more with us about that?
Yeah, I feel like all of these places of identity landmarks, which is, inclusive of being disabled, inclusive of being queer and non-binary and a person of color not born in the United States of America, all shapes my viewpoint. And I'm really interested these days in not flagging each one of those or any one of those, ones that I didn't even mention, but really living in the simultaneity of self and sharing that transparently. With disability, I feel like that really takes up 80% of my attention any single day, no
Mhm.
matter what I'm doing,
Mhm.
whether I'm hanging out with friends or in a creative space. So I'm often tracking my capacity. I'm walking into the room ready to share where my capacity is at, and also ask for the care that I need while offering clarity around what I can give. And that's kind of the meta of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I'm a very high functioning person living with chronic illness and disability. And sometimes I feel that capitalist pressure and weightedness of not being able to do enough.
Mm.
But in all of these realms, as an educator, consultant, and artist, I'm trying to center care work in more radical ways so that there's not an apology with disability, with anyone's
Mhm.
disabilities or access needs, emotional needs being put in there. Any needs that we have are available to be met in the room to the best of our ability if you are willing to share them.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, can you talk more about how being a disabled artist has influenced your work, your performance work?
Hmm. Yeah, to be very self centered about that, I don't collaborate with other artists in leadership very often.
Mm.
I like to be inside of my own process because I know how to trust myself.
Mhm.
And it creates a lot of fear and anxiety to be in other processes unless I have a developed relationship with that person. So I do collaborate and create work with other folks, um, but it definitely has a lot more communication
Mhm.
around what I need and how to have those needs met. In my work, I've been researching how to appear and disappear at any moment
Mm. Wow.
and
Yeah.
to never guarantee a completed performance if my body can't handle it. And that's happening in several different ways. It's something that I want to integrate into a values and access writer with presenters. Haven't done that yet,
Mhm.
but it's something that I do say to presenters up front. If my body can't do this, I don't owe you a performance.
Right.
I don't owe anyone a performance that will harm myself.
Right.
I've never had to actually interface with a consequence around that.
Mhm. That's fortunate
Yes.
and
Yeah.
actually a little surprising, to be frankly honest, you know?
Well, I think what really led me to this creative research as a dancer in the work that I'm also directing or choreographing,
Mhm.
uh, being able to appear and disappear at any point happened because I was in a piece where I was supposed to be on stage the whole time,
Mhm.
someone else's work, and it was 90 minutes long. It was a dance theater work. And I didn't know until those performances that I would not be able to stay on stage that long.
Mm.
Because there hadn't been rehearsals where I needed to interface with the adrenaline and the content and all of the effort of audience. And so I think at least I left the stage 3 times, and at most during that run, I left 5 times.
Hmm.
And yeah, that was really it felt hard for my body. I felt
Mhm.
like I was enduring this kind of title role in a dance theater work and couldn't meet my needs the
Mm.
way that I needed them met.
Mhm.
And I don't think I knew exactly what those needs were yet. And I've been living with this chronic illness out of remission since I was 22, when I'm 37 now.
Mhm.
So I've been learning that whole time how to lean into and say and dismantle the internalized ableism.
Right.
And so now that I know more, I feel really excited to appear and disappear. And it's a way that I also I'm creating this whole methodology around modular hierarchies from that. So it's taught me so much. And yeah, it's more pleasurable. I show up better. It's intimate, and I value a lot of intimacy in process.
Mhm. Mhm. And I would imagine that, it forms a very strong trust bond between you and your collaborators or co-conspirators, um,
Yes, absolutely.
which is that's awesome. Um, have you seen a shift around you in the way that, your work and others' work, um, meshes with the quote unquote industry in terms of like the last 15 years and you learning about your body in that context?
Yeah, I think so. I think more so in the last 5 years,
Mm,
there's been the radical shifts that
right.
I think we all know about,
Mhm.
and I'm feeling a more urgent shift towards access.
Mhm.
And much like the disability rights movement um, is so different from disability justice, I feel like there's a movement right now in my kind of closer artistic world, which I do think is speaking to the field. Of course, there are people who've been doing accessible performance for a long time. But in my close world, I'm seeing a lot more attention to access. I'm also seeing it in that kind of surface level, that sifting down into the disability justice deep care,
Mhm.
but the commitment to more accessible pathways or invitations for audiences being integrated into the process, not as an afterthought, but as an integral piece during the creation process. That's what I think
Mhm.
I'm noticing.
Mhm. Mhm. So interesting. I feel like there have been so many cultural shifts in the last 5 years, like you said. But yeah, it's interesting also to think like what went even before that and kind of like why was it so drastic 5 years ago, you know, as opposed to
Yeah.
prior to that? But thank you for sharing all of that. Do you mind, talking a little bit more about your disability so people have an idea of what you're dealing with specifically? Is that okay?
Yeah. Sometimes that's not okay to ask, but I feel okay being asked. because I talk about it a lot and because I'm an advocate. And I don't think everyone who is disabled has taken on the role of being an advocate.
Mhm.
Um, I have multiple chronic illnesses that are autoimmune related, and one of them is developing now. It's rheumatoid arthritis. So I'm
Mhm.
kind of in an early phase of that and discovered that not too long ago. So that affects my joints, being a dancer, having to take good care, and also being someone who has been in dance lineages that listen really deeply. I
Mhm.
feel resourced,
Mhm.
but it's definitely an ask to track my joint health all
Mhm.
of the time.
Mhm.
And then the condition that I had as a child and then went into remission and then came back as a young adult is called interstitial cystitis. And it does not have a cure.
Mm.
It is, in essence, the bladder being allergic to fluid. Uh,
Whoa. That sounds
yeah,
intense.
yeah. I have kind of a like visceral sensation of it when I say that. Um, it is intense. And some people with this condition really, really struggle.
Mhm.
And I feel super grateful that I do really struggle, but um, grateful that I know enough about my body to listen to it and
Mhm.
right now not have it control every part of my life.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I feel like there there's so many different ways to think about that. It does in some ways control so much of my life and not. And what does it mean to be high functioning with a disability, or are we
Mhm.
even using that kind of language? Yeah, I wrestle with that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, and then the big piece that I think I wrestle with is that when folks see me, I look healthy,
Right.
you know,
Right.
thing. I
Right.
don't look disabled. And um, my symptom management behavior doesn't necessarily let anyone know what's going on with me.
Mhm. Thank you for
And
sharing
sometimes
that.
it's hard to say it, and in that moment, people are like, why are you cutting in line in the bathroom? We've been waiting for this amount of time too. So all of those things. Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing it, and, thank you for being an advocate. I think it's great to have more people doing that work. Um, I wanted to ask you about, uh, liberatory curriculum building and modular hierarchy for the creative process. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. They feel definitely in the same world, but a little bit this motion, like colliding into one thing, they're
Yeah.
coexisting.
Venn diagram.
Um, yeah, yeah. The liberatory curriculum is really a pedagogy place, and modular hierarchy is creative process. And I'll start with the modular hierarchy
Mhm.
because I've recently been told like there's no such thing as modular hierarchy. We always need a boss,
Mm.
and I think there is a boss, but it's the work.
Mhm.
The work is the boss, and we're all aligning with the work.
Mhm.
I actually have a diagram. It's not in reach right now, but in modular hierarchy, the boss being the work, the conceptual content is the nucleus. And then all of the designers, all of the collaborators are co-authoring this world that expands from the nucleus.
Mhm.
And so in that, as the director, choreographer, I'm starting to use director a lot more.
Mhm.
It feels more in alignment with what's happening.
Mhm.
I'm directing dance, and we're all co-authoring that. So we start to stretch it open, and then pockets form, and then a collaborator will fill in that pocket of the world, the sound or the set, the world building, the movement itself. The folks that I work with are truly collaborators. They are looking to me for direction and for stretch, um, but they're authoring their own pathway into the understanding of the work.
Mhm.
And I rarely veto anything.
Mhm.
Um, I'm really looking at what kind of control I have as a leader
Mhm.
in this collective of artists. The only vetoes that happen is if it feels out of integrity with the nucleus that's been set and existing. It doesn't mean that the nucleus can't change or have other textures added on,
Mhm.
but if it's been existing in line and orange and this kind of sound and this kind of movement, and then you add in the opposites to it, it jumbles.
Mhm.
Or personal desires sometimes get in the way of it being in integrity with itself.
Mhm.
So the nucleus of the work is what we're building off of, and I
Mhm.
think that gives everyone space to be in their authorship in the creation. So we all then, you feel really devoted to the concept.
Mhm.
It's not an imposed concept.
Mhm. I love that. Um, I have questions about it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's sort of a very ideal scenario. I also feel like that runs into a lot of the preconceived ways that, creation has worked in the past, and I wonder um what you've run into with that in terms of other people's sense of authorship, and you mentioned that it is kind of a collective authorship, but,
Mhm.
do you run into moments where, people that are part of the group are feeling like they want more ownership or they want less?
Hmm. That's a good question.
It's sticky.
It's sticky and specific. It's
Yeah.
like, what have I um, come up against? I think there's a lot of invitation to yield with each
Mhm.
other.
Mhm.
And I also feel like I build performance with a core of people that I'm very close to.
Mhm.
And then the more independent artists who come into the world, we try to create a invitation sense that's really, it's warm and it's friendly, and it's not so much about the I'm hiring you to do this thing for me.
Mhm.
And I think that creates a good nurtured connection.
Mhm.
So there's not perhaps as much rub when something needs to change, as long as there's the yield.
Mhm.
I did have a circumstance a little bit recently with a designer who came in feeling really strong about something that they had made, but it was out of alignment with the nucleus.
Mhm.
It wasn't wrong
Mhm.
or it wasn't bad, but it was out of alignment with the nucleus of the work.
Right.
So then we shifted. And I
Uh-huh.
think we talked and we understood that shift together. Um, Besides that, there's another time that I brought in a designer for a work about 5 years ago, and I had a little bit of an idea about what I wanted from him. And I said, this is how I envision it. It's like a hip hop eulogy.
Mhm.
And he was like, or it's a film in French. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know. But because I'm committed to modular hierarchy,
Yeah.
I yielded,
Uh-huh.
got a film in French, and it was a beautiful eulogy at the end of this work.
Mhm.
And it fit in its way. It was an epilogue that I could have never imagined. And that's also why I'm committed to modular hierarchy, because I don't think that the things that I imagine um, are the epitome of the art.
Right.
And I really understand that there's so much that I can't imagine. So why not, if you are willing, if you want to be in a collaborative relationship like that, do it.
Mhm. Mhm. That's
Do that
beautiful.
shared.
Amazing.
And I mean, I should also say, not every process that I am in, I work this way.
Right.
I really work this way with the core ensemble that I've been making work with for some of these people with for years. And when I receive a commission of a different shape, then I might not work this way. I might work more in a traditional hierarchy,
Mhm.
or in more of a um, traditional hierarchy being one place, but then collective decision making being a totally different place.
Mhm.
I also don't work in collective decision making unless it's going to be a very, very long process,
Mhm.
because that's a radical and slow thing.
Mhm. Um, can you tell us more about how for you those two things differentiate from each other?
I think it's all about scale and design.
Mhm.
I have another project coming up that hasn't really started yet. The ideation is starting and rolling, and I don't know the piece yet, so
Mhm.
I can't tell what the nucleus is. But I'm collaborating with another choreographer.
Mhm.
We have very different aesthetics. We've never made anything um, together before, or even really side by side. We are friends. He has produced my work. And I think we're really leaning into the friendship, but also the experimentation of trying to make something together.
Mhm.
And this platform is supported by the Kohl Center. So it wasn't our idea to do. They kind of have some leadership or control over what that is. And we're saying yes to that. And then in inviting collaborators to make this new dance, the transparent part was we're going to do this fast
Mhm.
because of scheduling.
Right.
So we're going to do an immersive process. We don't know what we're doing. We might clash. We might not agree. We're still going to work through that. We're going to ask you for a lot of improvisation and to put your voice in this way. Are you willing?
Mhm.
So I think, yeah, the transparency becomes where we're really giving people an idea, but also letting them know, we're in risk.
Mhm.
We're collaborating in this leadership position. So there's still something in that is, not a traditional hierarchy, but there's more control from leadership
Mhm.
in that
Mhm.
piece.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Did you wanna talk about the liberatory curriculum building?
Yeah. I'm writing a little essay right now for a book that will be published. I'm not even sure when the publication date is, but a friend is editing the book together, writing it,
Mhm.
and it's in or on liberatory curriculum
Mhm.
in dance, both community and an institution. And I've been working in a lot of different ways of saying liberatory curriculum, and so I'm borrowing that term from her
Mhm.
because I was like, oh, that's what it is.
Mhm.
So I wanted to say that. But I have languaged my pedagogy overall for a long time as a restorative justice pedagogy. So that's what I'm writing about.
Okay. Mhm.
And it is truly in alignment with and an appropriation of capital R restorative, capital J justice.
Mhm.
I don't think that all of our justice lineages should be blanket synonymous.
Yeah.
I think they all come from their own timelines and authorships and very different demographics.
Mhm.
This is a lineage that really refers to a person who has been incarcerated coming back into society.
Hmm. Mhm.
That's its kind of historical center point.
Mhm.
I picked restorative justice because I think there's so much more besides that center point that is inside of restorative.
Mhm.
And I also feel that inside of restorative, we acknowledge the potential for harm, that harm has happened and could happen,
Mhm.
and that it is each individual's and a collective community's responsibility to know that that is a potential in the room.
Mhm.
And the way that we can acknowledge power and privilege in a creative space is essential to saying what's happening in that space. Therefore, a harm reduction plan.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm asking participants or students to be aware of the power and privilege they have, and not in those kind of general ways of race, economic privilege, gender, but a really nuanced read on their privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm asking for that in each moment because we're not putting that at the door. We're not checking our baggage at the door. We're not checking our privilege at the door because we all have agreed to be here in the room to do some dancing together.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that exists. I think all of those dynamics are in the room too. And so if we can have a nuanced read on them, it changes the way that the nervous system lives in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So every class that I teach, nearly every class that I teach, since about 2016, I start with the question, what's a way that you're recognizing your privilege today?
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I will talk about a lot of the privileges as I'm going through whatever exercises they are. We keep dancing. We introduce ourselves, we talk, but we keep dancing. And the privilege might be towards physical flexibility. The
Mm-hmm.
privilege might be towards understanding the jargon I'm using for this particular improvisation or form. It might be proximity to me,
Mm-hmm.
or familiarity with this room, or and
Mm-hmm.
I often will refer to my greatest privilege being tenacity.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of potential for people to read how they are interacting with dancing and dancing in a room with others through the lens of power and privilege, which I think again helps us yield with each other
Mm-hmm.
because we're always a collective nervous system.
Yeah.
But the high key emphasis on individuation, I think, is part of what continues to create more harm.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very jargon filled umbrella of what I'm doing. But yeah.
No, but it's really interesting, and I'm glad that you clearly spelled everything out. And I know what you mean about, when people are invited into a room and then they're told, like, just check it at the door. It just doesn't work that way. That's
Yeah.
unrealistic.
Yeah.
We can't check all of our biases. They're just in there. So it takes that, like, time to be thinking and doing work to
Yeah.
recognize what our biases are, etc.
Well, and what effort it is to try to ignore integral parts of ourselves.
Mm.
And how does that meet, a potential creativity? It's really hard to be creative if you've been told to ignore that you're sad today,
Mhm.
or or anything of that, or that you feel uncomfortable. Just, we're all here, we're all dancing, so just be comfortable, you're
Mhm.
here.
Mhm.
What does that do to creativity?
Right. Yeah. Ignore how you're really feeling.
Yeah.
I wanted to, because we already sort of touched on this, I wanted to ask you about, the people that you work with,
Hmm.
and how you decide who you're going to work with and who you're gonna be in community with, and what those processes look like.
I had a mentor once say, like, if you want to be here for me, I'll be here for you. And I think similarly to that, I try to make open invitations as much as I can to be in relationship with me if folks want. And that's to my students or participants in my classes. And, maybe that looks like social media or being an audience member. And then sometimes it looks like developing more of a relationship.
Mhm.
And for a long time, I worked with people I had very deep, close relationships with,
Mhm.
because that helped me feel more safe and emboldened,
Mhm.
especially around my disability.
Mhm.
Since becoming an artist here in the Twin Cities 15 years ago, that has really shifted project by project. And I just had an audition for a new project, this one that I'm collaborating with another choreographer on. And we had 70 people come,
Hmm.
which was wild and amazing. And everyone was stunning. So, what a challenge. About 5 years ago, I had my first open audition, and it was over 2 days, and 50 people showed up. And I knew I was casting one person
Mhm.
because everyone else had, I was working with this idea of like, what if I choose some people and invite some people?
Mhm.
So some people know my language, how I like to work. They feel like good support people, and then the new people get to join that culture and also shape it. So that's kind of where I was starting when trying to open up to more community, because there's not a lot of open auditions.
Mhm.
There are more than I think I'm aware of, and I'm seeing more and more these days now that I'm looking.
Mhm.
But it also can be a very insular community.
Mhm.
um, with the people that I have been choosing, not through auditions but through invitation, those are usually folks that I feel an affinity with, and that I kind of go through an artistic courtship period with.
Uh-huh.
Usually they don't know it, or they're also, some of them have been like, I've been courting you too.
Secret courtship.
And that looks like going to their performances if they're performing, seeing them in class. One of the people that I collaborate with a lot right now is Marisol Hurling, and she started coming to classes when I was just subbing
Mhm.
at Xenon,
Mhm.
and I would see her. I'd see how she showed up to the material, and also in like an openness to friendship. And we hadn't really developed a friendship when I was like, I've seen you. I see how you show up, and I would love to work with you somehow.
Mhm.
And so then we started to develop a friendship, and then the project came.
Mhm.
And now we're on our third project together.
Mhm.
I really think about who the individuals are that I'm working with, rather than trying to fill a skill set
Mhm.
or an aesthetic.
Mhm.
Because again, with the modular hierarchy or any version of that, I'm interested in people showing up in their strengths and their passion and the way they want to meet material, more so than being shaped to what I want.
Mhm.
So I'm looking for strong individuals, and I think that also lends itself to courtship in a way, because then I can go see these folks.
Mhm.
I just started working with Eric Gonzalez, and I had been kind of following his work for a while,
Mhm.
and finally the moment arrived where I could invite him to do something, and was thrilled that he said yes.
Nice. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Um, this is perhaps a tricky question. I don't know, maybe it's not. How do you feel about auditions and applications and things like that? And making
Ugh.
selections from those processes? It's loaded. It's not an easy thing to, you know, to grapple with.
Mhm. I think auditions are amazing. The ones that I have been in are amazing.
Mhm.
Um, I'll be a little self-centered and say that I think the ones that I have been in, because I've been leading them, are amazing. Also because of the way that I pull away from any of the like, show me everything you've got. You
Yeah.
have to be the best one in the room, and that's what gets you cast.
Yeah.
I talk a lot about revealing yourself and how you think. That auditions are mutual.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm trying on, sharing what I'm about and what my values are while you're trying them on. And at any point, you could say, I'm not about that.
Yeah.
and then it's not the right fit.
Mhm.
Um, you're also meeting other people in the room for, like everyone could do this project. Everyone could do their own project. Anyone could be in this position or that position.
Mhm.
So in that kind of spirit, I feel like I've had just some amazing audition experiences
Mhm.
that I hope feel exciting and like maybe a little nervous making, but not intimidating or disciplinary or rejecting in any of that.
Mhm.
As far as applications, reject, rejection.
Oh, I
um,
that whatever context you wanna talk about 'em, yeah.
it just feels like a word that like sits next to applications and applying
Yeah.
for things. Uh, I feel like I did a year, maybe it was 2 years, during kind of core pandemic where I wasn't really applying for anything.
Mhm.
Some things because I was in a sit out period because I had received it
Mhm.
before.
Mhm.
And then some because I like to learn how to write an application for a certain, you know, opportunity
Mhm.
by doing by being on a panel
Mhm.
for it.
Mhm.
So I was doing a bunch of panelist things
Right.
and national grants mostly, and learning a lot and feeling really inspired and knowing, again, I think this is my viewpoint, is like, oh, we all deserve it in so many ways.
Yeah.
And how do you reckon with the finite amount of money and the infinite amount of need, desire, and creative
Mhm.
offerings? And I definitely, depending on the program, had my bias and my underscores for how I was scoring, and also how they told me to score.
Mhm.
But I felt really inspired
That's
being a
great.
panelist.
Yeah.
Here's the but. The but is I try really hard not to count any kind of grant before getting it.
Mhm.
And there's a time, and I feel this in the past, and I actually am feeling it more currently too, where I'm like, the need is high.
Mhm.
I actually can't take that residency if I don't get this funding.
Right.
And yeah, I really I want to reject the like strain around that.
Mhm.
And it's a reality. And I also feel very privileged in funding. I feel like I have, received a lot of funding at critical times.
Mhm.
And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. Thank goodness.
And yeah, thank goodness. But each time I level up to something, like I definitely feel like in my fellowship years, I created some big goals. And some of those goals are, paying collaborators more money, $25 an hour. I want to be competitive in that. I want them to know that they can um, count on a rate that feels really good for them.
Mhm.
So that if they're taking time off work, it doesn't feel like they're losing money. Anyway, so leveling up, but then keeping that as a reality and continuing to level up
Mhm.
when mostly funded by grants and donations is really hard, really stressful.
Yeah.
And each no that feels like it's for a project that's already on a timeline, it's really disappointing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know the right way to do it. I've been on panels that are um, lottery based at their final stage. I've been, on panels where you're deciding, who gets kind of, thrown out, not thrown out, because we're not throwing out artists, but, like, oh, this one just doesn't go on.
Mhm.
Um, and some that are scoring with numbers and then those scores go through. I don't know.
Yeah. It's fraught.
Yeah,
It's fraught.
I could use a lot more funding for a lot more support and to be giving more money to artists and to create the fullness of the visions I have.
Mhm.
And I also really believe in scaling towards what I have available.
Mhm.
All of those things are in dialogue with each other. But if I could just get a lot more money, that would
Yeah.
solve a lot of problems.
People ask me sometimes, like, "Do you buy lottery tickets?" And I'm like, "No, why would I wanna win the lottery?" Because I feel like therein lies a whole other conundrum, you know? But but yeah, funding for work. Let's get more of that. Thank you for sharing that. Uh, so I was looking through some of your pieces. In your piece, Bruja Fugitive Majesty, which you presented in
Mhm,
2017, you talk about being a cultural fugitive.
mhm.
Can you tell us more about that and how your thoughts around that have evolved or not since you created that work?
Mm. I still feel like a cultural fugitive, and I feel very committed to a forever underscore. I use this word underscore. It's a bit of a dance improvisation word, but it's like the low hum vibration underneath of all of me.
Mhm.
And that comes definitely with the creative part of me. This underscore is displacement. And I really feel a softness for displacement.
Mhm.
And it's not an angst around it. I'm an adoptee. That piece is largely centering being an adoptee and trying to find the who I am through all of these different archetypes or guises that I put on as a younger person, and maybe not even a younger person that I'm still putting on in different ways as a way to find my center or myself or my feet on the ground or who I am with others, because the displacement of being an adoptee is so extreme.
Mhm.
I feel displacement or otherness in a lot of different ways. You know, being disabled but looking healthy, um, being non-binary and being a femme. Like there's a lot of different ways I could feel that and do feel that. And so the displacement or the simultaneity, the multitude of self
Mhm.
always feels true to me.
Mhm.
And I think that's a synthesis of cultures.
Mhm.
I like the poetics of cultural fugitive.
Mhm.
Another project that I'm working on, or about to start working on, that will happen next year is a solo, and I've been thinking a lot about Bruja because it feels like maybe Bruja, when it happened, turned into this big explosion of saying yes to all of me.
Mhm.
And then when I make works collaboratively, I don't shrink um, to be small,
Mhm.
but I shrink myself to make space for others.
Mhm.
I still feel right sized.
Mhm.
So this next solo that I am making, I think I want to do that expansion again. And Bruja still feels like a nugget in there.
Mhm.
And the fugitive part also feels strong
Mhm.
in there. I've
Mhm.
been thinking about and researching the thief
Hmm.
as part of that.
The
And
thief.
it definitely feels related to culture and to be not monocultural in oneself.
Mhm. Hmm.
I could probably talk about this so much more, but I'll pause there.
Feel free. I'm curious about the thief.
Me too. No, I don't quite know it yet.
Yeah, the thief will become,
Yeah,
or it will emerge from whatever it already is.
yeah.
Um, I also wanted to talk about your piece, Gospels of Oblivion, which you presented in
Mm.
2018. You mentioned that it's the favorite piece of yours that you've ever created. Could you tell us more about that piece and what makes it stand out as your favorite?
I think for ensemble work, it really synthesized my aesthetic in a way that was so pleasurable to see the outcome of.
Mhm.
And I worked on it for maybe 5 years.
Mhm.
And
Nice.
so it grew in different iterations, and we got bored with it, and then we fell back in love with it. I think it speaks so much, like the sequins and the wigs and the comedy. I make a lot of work that feels kind of precious and ritual, and that is very true to me.
Mhm.
I have to sit longer to get into my Scorpio moon a little more, and then we have some dark comedy,
Yeah.
and I like that.
Yeah.
That's fun. And Timmy Rayborg, and Kathleen Pender were, prior to that time and still now, two of my closest friends.
Mhm.
So we played a lot, and we had that deep trust of being very close in the process. Um, we performed a lot of different iterations in a lot of different places
Mhm.
before that piece came to its fruition at the Southern
Mhm.
for the Candy Box Festival. And by then it felt so alive. It felt like it knew itself so well.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, I have such fondness. I'm just thinking of it. The way they also integrated like original song and voice and the world building. Maybe it feels like the first time in my career that I didn't um, scale down from the vision that
Uh-huh.
I had.
Uh-huh.
I like very, very slowly scaled it all the way out.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, that's it. We also performed it 6 or 7 times in the last run, um, the full piece run,
Mhm.
because the festival was long at that point. And the growth that happened from the first opening night to closing night was
Hmm.
remarkable. I think that also made it one of my favorites. That's maybe too many times to perform a work in 2 weeks for me, but it asked something. It asked for development,
Yeah.
and because there's so much improvisation in it too, it changed.
Uh-huh.
It always wasn't the same,
Mhm.
and that's kind of how I do improvisation.
Uh-huh.
It knows itself so well that it's always the same, but there's different things happening to make that sameness happen.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I was working with the kind of modular hierarchy values. So that's the piece with the eulogy in it that
Uh-huh.
I
Oh,
could have
okay.
never imagined.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and the set designer, brought in things that I also couldn't have imagined. There wasn't always a tent being erected in the first few moments of the piece. So, yeah, the way that everyone collaborated into that was really pleasurable for me too.
That's great. Um, I wanted to ask you about your experience growing up. Where did you grow up? What was that like? And how did your early life experiences influence what you're doing now with your work and just being an artist at all?
Mhm. I was born in Santiago, Chile, and my adoptive dad came down and got me. Um, the crude part of myself acknowledges that I am a purchased baby.
Mm,
I may have been a stolen baby
hmm,
because it was during the time of the Pinochet dictatorship. And then I grew up in Fort Dodge, Iowa, which is a fairly medium sized town
mm,
with a community college. And uh, I grew up very, very middle class, maybe a little lower middle class, but I don't know. The spectrum wasn't that wide
right.
there.
Yeah.
So, um, and I have two other also adopted siblings from different countries,
Hmm.
and so don't really recall the process of my sister being adopted, but do very much recall the process of my brother being adopted
Mm,
from Vietnam, and he was an orphanage baby at that point. They weren't allowing families to go over there, so he arrived on an airplane and didn't speak
hmm,
English
hmm.
but spoke some Vietnamese, and had a little life before
Mm.
that. And then I saw how I was old enough to see him integrate, um, assimilate. And I was always very conscious that I was an adoptee. Um, Definitely artistically, there is a through line
Mhm.
of digesting that
Mhm.
over and over again and
Mhm.
differently.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, three brown babies with white parents. Um, One who much more was in a savior complex,
Hmm.
and I grew up around a lot of mental illness.
Hmm.
And I feel comfortable sharing that because I've also written articles about it, and it shaped a lot of the healing justice lineage that I come from.
Mhm.
Was also through developmental psychotherapy and bioenergetic therapy techniques, because I felt really interested as a young person in understanding the woman who was raising me.
Hmm.
And she was very open about her mental illness, although I don't know that I still believe the same things I thought I believed about her.
Hmm.
That's a kind of vague. When you're told as a young person, like, I'm mentally ill and it looks like this, but then when you grow up and you have more perspective and you're like, oh, was it that or was it this?
Mhm.
That's kind of the place that I'll always be in. My mom's passed. Um,
Right.
but yeah, growing up around mental illness like gave me this is spine, like it gave me a lot of backbone.
Hmm.
um Not to go into like with the trauma of that, there is trauma in that.
Mhm.
And I've integrated that in different ways, and one of the big ways was trying to understand it,
Mhm.
and trying to have a lot of compassion for her. And I do think that in finding compassion for her and understanding why she was the way she was opened these doorways to my work,
Mhm.
um, my healing work, and a lot of the creative work as well.
Mhm.
Uh, and then there's the race thing of being a brown baby raised by white folks. I didn't know if I was white or black because I didn't know what brown was. And
Mhm.
I learned all of that a little bit later in life. Always knew I was Chilean.
Mhm.
Um, and integrating that and letting that change too, or um, change me with all of the reckonings.
Mhm.
I think by the not knowing has strengthened that simultaneity of self through my core
Mhm.
that I know now. That
Mhm.
is, um, not stagnant. It's flexible, still willing to be investigated. I don't think I believe in the system of adoption.
Mhm. Interesting. Yeah.
I could be challenged by that,
Mhm.
or on that, have
Mhm.
critical dialogue. Um,
What about it uh forms that opinion or that feeling?
I think specifically transracial adoption. Um, yeah, I just think that there will often, or maybe always, be harm systemically
Mhm.
to brown children raised by white people who paid for those children.
Hmm.
To again be a little bit blunt and crude about it.
I
Um,
mean,
I don't know if that it integrates the savior complex, but does it do right by it? Are people learning more about that? I was interacting probably like 10 years ago with more adoption services
mhm.
folks and doing some consulting around the racialized trauma of transracial adoption. And I felt too close to it to ethically continue. The bias is too loud.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, but I also, I think I feel how I feel now, and also feel flexible about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Our feelings and thoughts are constantly doing that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Oh.
I would say, like, because of the amount of trauma in my home that I grew up in because of mental illness, uh, that really also shaped, being an active participant in school and arts practices, to be out of the house. And I by no means had like a um, physically abusive or home. I'm not like saying this vaguely because I'm hiding any of that, but the kind of weight of all of these things really led me to being an autonomous person out in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
my tenacity privilege again started young, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, Fort Dodge was a town that had an orchestra, a lot of community theater, musical theater, and valued its arts. So I I went to undergrad for music
Mm-hmm.
and voice,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of finished with music composition as my focus. But I started this love of music and performing and um, training as an artist very young,
Mm-hmm.
because it was an escape for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I I think it feels like it could be that for a lot of people.
Mhm. Yeah,
To this very day.
absolutely.
What brought you to the Twin Cities?
It was an accident.
Mm.
I was moving to Seattle,
Mm-hmm.
U-Haul and everything. Um, and I went to college, undergrad in Decorah at Luther. And so many people that I graduated with were moving to the Twin Cities because it's the next closest big city. And I was like, I know nothing about the Twin Cities, but I'm not moving there. But I'm going to go stay there with some friends on my way to Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew the dance community in Seattle a little bit. I really loved it. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. And my aunt lives there. I'll stay with her. Had a whole plan. The friends that I was staying with had just moved here from Seattle. And within a week of staying with them, I had signed a lease down the street. And was like, okay, well, let's just see what this place is about. And I knew a few people who were dancing here.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I guess kind of the rest is history. I just stayed, and I did a low residency program out west. And I was like, maybe I should move to the Bay Area. No,
No.
that's not quite right. Um, During the pandemic, I tried to move to my home away from home in Massachusetts,
Mm.
and lasted about 9 months there before coming home. And that was a great 9 months. It was a perfect pandemic choice.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and here I am back here because I kind of can't get away, and because I really do love it.
Yeah, it's great.
No dreams of moving away right now.
Cool. Um, what or who inspires you?
So many people. Um, I actually wrote a grant. I think it was the Jerome, and they asked that question, and I couldn't really round it out. So I just listed like 50 people.
Yeah.
And it was everyone from Sandra Yabara, who is a movement video multidisciplinary Latina artist, um, to Celine Dion, who like always gave me songs I could sing when I was young and wanted to bang on a piano.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, um, I read a lot,
Mhm.
and I just finished a book by Joshua Whitehead, which was brilliant and very inspiring. My mentor Miguel Gutierrez and Sarah Shelton Mann, absolutely. Yeah, I'm inspired by my partner Sequoia Hawk, who is a recent Jerome Fellow filmmaker. there's just it's endless. I
Mhm.
mean, it's really endless, and
Yeah.
like I said, everything from pop culture to art in so many different mediums. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those impossible to answer questions, at least concisely.
I did listen to Bad Bunny's new single release, like, on repeat this morning, so I should say Bad Bunny.
Cool, thank you. Um, so you have 3 premieres coming up in 2024. Can you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about those projects?
Yeah. So I've mentioned a couple of them. The Coles has a program called Merge and March, and they partner 2 different choreographers or companies together to make something together.
Mhm,
And that looks like collaborative making. And that part is supported by them. And then they support the full evening. So usually the companies or choreographers will each bring something of their own. Well, I don't know if that's true usually. I think it's taken a lot of different shapes. Um, but they bring something of their own and they have a collaborative piece. That's what we're doing.
mhm,
So Matthew Janjeski will present some arena dances material. We're making this brand new piece with a new ensemble that from the people who auditioned, and we don't know what it is yet,
mhm,
but it definitely feels queer and I use this word maybe too often, but liberatory,
mhm,
like a reclamation.
mhm.
I don't want to say too much because I don't want to say something that you would disagree with because we're discovering what it is. Um, so that will be one of the new works that I am making is
Great.
with him.
And when is
In
that?
that same,
Oh, sorry.
that is the last weekend in March. I think I don't have a calendar in front of me, but maybe the 22nd, 23rd
Mhm,
of March,
mhm,
2 shows. In that same evening, because Arena is contributing some, and then we'll have our shared piece, I am making a new solo,
mhm.
which of course is scary to me because the times that I can't appear and disappear as well is in a solo,
Yeah.
and I haven't since Bruja. And Bruja was made very specifically to give me breaks during the solo,
Mhm,
but this will be shorter. So I'm learning what this piece about the thief. I don't know that that's its title, but I'm learning about the thief
right.
for this piece, and I'm really hoping to integrate live vocals because that's a place I want to challenge myself as a singer who doesn't sing very often anymore. Um,
Mhm,
it feels like the grandeur of the Coles stage is not something I have aspired to because I really like intimacy of smaller spaces,
mhm,
but I do feel excited to use the vastness of that space,
mhm,
the whole space, not just the stage,
mhm,
somehow, some way, and
mhm.
voice feels like it's the thing that can reach.
Yeah, yeah, and you can exercise that expansiveness that you were talking about.
Yeah,
Cool. And that's
so
in
that's something.
the same few days you said? In at the
Yeah,
end of March? Okay. Mhm.
yep.
And what's the 3rd
And
piece?
then the next month, I'll premiere Dearest Liberator, Disaster, Disaster, Disaster at the Red Eye.
Mhm,
And this piece, similar to Gospels of Oblivion, it's been in process for multiple years. We just showed the first draft of the full work after a residency at Rosie Seamus Dance last month, and that went really well. I feel like I know the work now. It has all of its foundation or its skeleton,
mhm.
and now we have another year to shape and nuance and learn more about it, or destroy a part of it. Hopefully, not too many parts of it.
Disaster.
And that piece is a meditation on climate catastrophe, but really the human coping mechanisms around it, and
Mhm,
like what have we packed in our go bag? Are you ready? Are you ignoring it? How do you connect with each other?
mm,
How do we connect with elemental solidarity and then also advocate for what has not yet been extracted from or colonized if we can.
Hmm. Yeah. Wow.
Encompasses all of a little bit.
The idea of a go bag, and we all know what that is now, and we're like planning what's in our go bag. It's like, why do we have to do that? Ugh,
Yeah.
Lord. All right. Thank you. And you said that is April 2024 at the
Yes,
Red Eye.
end of April.
Uh-huh.
At the Red Eye.
Okay. Cool.
And that piece is designed specifically for 30 audience members. So I think we'll
Oh.
have 3 or 4 performances.
Mhm. Are audience members part of the show, or you just wanna cap it at that?
Um,
Or
they are a little bit
TBD?
part of the show, but not in an intimidating way. Audience members are invited to join calls to action and truly in my alignment with access right now, a smaller audience with escape routes for everyone or break routes and spaciousness is part of the design. So that's why it's 30.
Mm, cool, thoughtful.
Yeah.
Um, if folks wanna see you perform or learn more about you, where is a good place for them to find that information?
Mm. My website is a pretty good place if you want to read about what I've been doing, what I do. It does not get regular updates, so it doesn't really promote any of the things that I have coming up. But to read about my body of work and to watch things, my website, tajawillartist.com, is a great place to see those things. If you want to know what I'm doing artistically, what I'm eating daily, fascinated by on a more regular basis. Social media, specifically Instagram, is a great place to see what I'm up to.
Okay, and what's your
And I
social media
advertise.
handle?
It's Taja Will XO
Okay,
on Instagram.
okay.
Yeah, and I definitely will publicize on there when I'm teaching classes. And I also do decolonial herbalism and sometimes pop up for that. When I have performances, I'll definitely have those all over the socials.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for being so generous with the interview today. I really appreciate that. Um, yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. This has been the Sanguine Arts Locavart podcast, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.